JB, a real treat for folks out there. We were talking about upsets earlier in the week when we had Kyle McKinnon on, and hey, WestCon. It wasn't an upset, but it was a heck of a game to avert an upset. But earlier in the day, another tremendous game was played, and it was, by all rights, an upset. I mean, ranked versus unranked, and ranked lost in that game because unranked played a heck of a game, especially on defense in the fourth quarter. And our Coach's Corner guest is the coach of that team. Go ahead and introduce him.
Yeah, well, it was a big homecoming win for the Rowan Profs as Coach Accorsi saw his team. Speaking of comebacks, they had to come back and fight, and they hung on for a 28-27 victory over then number 8 Wesley. Huge win for the Profs. So welcome onto the show, Coach.
Thank you for having me. We really appreciate the coverage.
We wish we had done it a little bit earlier. Rowan is a team that I go way back with. Joyce Solomon, your former athletic director, used to be on the tournament committee. Used to talk to her all the time about Rowan football and highs and lows. Obviously, it's been an interesting last decade, let's say. But a win like Saturday's has got to put a real high on things as the season has had its ups and downs. Let's talk about just the atmosphere of that game first. It was a homecoming game. It was very clear that there was a lot of support for the team out there. And to take out a team like Wesley is a heck of a feat. What were you telling your team before this game to get them riled up? And then let's say at halftime when things were still very much in doubt in that game.
Well, we've always talked about during homecoming, it's probably one of the biggest events on campus during the year, very similar to probably graduation. Great support, a lot of alumni, a lot of students, a lot of people here. We talked about that part of it. We beat Wesley a couple of years ago in a similar situation when Joe Callahan was the head coach or the quarterback. It was homecoming. I'm pretty sure they were ranked. We weren't, and we kind of pulled out the same type of game. We had to score at the end of the game to win it, different than this game, but very, very similar. I think our conference lends itself to great games. There's a lot of good football teams. I think that was evident last year when Frostburg, who didn't win the conference, lost to Wesley, made the big run in the playoffs. So every week in our conference, all the teams know it's going to be a very, very hard-fought contest. I thought if we could get it in the third or fourth quarter and maybe press them a little bit, we'd have a chance to pull it out. When I went in at halftime, I just basically asked them and said, what do you guys think? Are they that much better than we are? And they certainly responded and said no and didn't think so. So great atmosphere, great small college football game. You couldn't ask for anything more, but I think you see that happen a lot in our conference.
Yeah, you guys definitely seem to be a pretty battle-tested, Coach. I mean, this is the fourth game you've had so far this season where it's come down to either basically a score or 3 points or less. Do you think your team's sort of experience with that resiliency of knowing that they can win these close contests, it helps their confidence in these types of environments?
I think it does help. Obviously, we started the season over at Widener, a very good football program, a very good football team, and we had to pull it out in overtime with a huge crowd at their place on a Thursday night. Again, I think we're a little bit tested in some of these games where we're able to pull it out at the end and pull out a victory and a win. I think the players really responded all week in practice before the game. I think they were talking about the game when we had beat the College of New Jersey the Saturday night before. So again, I think all those things help. They were kind of in one tough ball game when they lost to Frostburg, but most of the other games they've basically, kind of blown teams away. So, we just talked about that and said if there's a way we can get it close in the third and fourth quarter, maybe that part of ourselves could really come about in the end of the game and pull out a great victory.
Doesn't get any easier for you, Coach. Salsbury is up next, currently undefeated, finally getting ranked in the D3Football.com top 25 poll. They've been on my ballot for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks at this point. A good team that's not exactly blown the doors off everybody they played. Montclair almost pulled it off a couple of weeks ago, although Montclair almost pulled it off against Frostburg State this previous week. Yeah. So as you said, there's a lot of good football being played in the NJAC. But against a team like Salisbury that has this triple option offense that used to maybe feature a little bit more passing than we're seeing this season, how do you prepare defensively for that change of nature of offense especially? Is it something that still kind of vexes and perplexes your defense, or is it something that you're used to at this point?
Well, I think what helps in our conference is there's a lot of variety with a different type of offenses. We've just played Wesley, who was a spread, no huddle, really fast-paced team, and now we play Salisbury, the slot option type program. You see a lot of different things in our conference, so you got to be able to really play great defense against some really good offenses. And certainly it poses a lot of challenges in the past when Southern Virginia was a slot option team that helped prepare you for getting ready for Salisbury as well. Southern Virginia changed, so they're not. So this is really our first test against this type of offense. It poses a lot of challenges. They do a lot of different things. They give you a lot of formations, and certainly they're exceptional at running the football. Younger quarterback. They had a senior last year that really could throw and pass. They have some younger quarterbacks, so they're somewhat limited, but they still can throw the football. So, it's just a different type of team that you play. But again, in our conference, we see that week in and week out with a lot of different offenses. So you have to be adaptable to be able to change. And defensively, you got to, be able to play a lot of players and do a lot of different things. And certainly, they can run the football and run the triple and the option and do it exceptionally well. And, block at the point of attack and really make things happen. So it's going to be a headache for us and another challenge, but again, another ranked team. We had 3 ranked teams last week. Not many conferences have that. We go from one ranked team to another ranked team, and we played an earlier ranked team. So again, I just think that speaks volumes about the New Jersey Athletic Conference and the type of football that's played week in and week out. And there's a lot of good teams in our conference. It just makes it tough week in and week out.
Definitely a running of a gauntlet. And speaking of running, Coach, in the last couple of weeks, you've had one of your senior running backs, John Mannion, who's really stepped up and played really well for you. I mean, obviously, when you go out and you recruit these young men, it'd be great to get one of those, guy who starts every game for 4 years, but I would think as a coach and to a certain extent a teacher, it must be really gratifying to see players like John who, kind of cut their teeth maybe, through special teams and more of a reserve role, but really kind of come into their own when given, an opportunity to shine like he has now in his senior year. He obviously had a huge game for you guys against Wesley with three rushing touchdowns. Tell us a little bit about, from your experience as a coach and as a teacher, I guess, what it's like for you to see these guys kind of grow into these big roles.
Yeah, and, you mentioned John's a perfect example. John really kind of broke through playing for us from special teams. We had seen him in some JV games, and he had done a really great job in the return game, especially punt return, and that's kind of what got him on the field with us. And then the development to see him grow and develop and turn into not only just a football player, but the young man that he is right now. Still kind of quiet, doesn't really say a lot, but again, just works really hard at what he does. And a lot of his success is from Anthony Diorio, one of our senior captains, who had carried the ball the last couple of years quite a bit. We had to find some roles. We had an injury to our tight end. We had to find a way to try to run the football, and we asked our senior captain running back to be a blocking back. In the last couple of weeks, Anthony's done a great job of that. So when you have a senior captain make the ultimate sacrifice to take a less glorious role, but just as important, it shows to the rest of your team that everybody is really important, and football is the ultimate team sport. It's tough these days. Everybody wants the headlines. Everybody wants to carry the ball. Everybody wants to throw and catch. Yeah. Sometimes you look past the other individuals. And again, I thought our offensive line the last couple of weeks has done a tremendous job of blocking, not only run blocking, but pass blocking as well. So, there's a lot of pieces that go into it. And I think if you ask John and Anthony and some of the skilled players, they'll tell you it starts with the offensive line, but it starts with knowing what your role is, knowing what your job is, accepting that role and job, which is tough these days for people to do, and then just try to be the best you can be in what you're being asked to do. And so it started a couple weeks ago with Anthony, kind of moving to that fullback, H-back spot and taking the ultimate sacrifice as a captain. And what better example to the rest of your team to know that, you got to do what is best for everybody, not just yourself. And sometimes we lose sight of that these days.
Very YD3 story. Division III is unique in so many different ways, and that type of story to me is the epitome of the selflessness of the Division III athlete out there, and a great story to hear that. One of the things, looking at the bigger D3 landscape, a lot of people forget. In 2013, the last time I believe your team was in the playoffs, if memory serves here, I'm going to check my own notes. Actually, you were in 14 also, but in 2013, I think you may have beaten Wesley that year, and Brockport and you, I think, were tied atop the NJAC standings. And I mention it because Brockport's no longer in the NJAC, and look at what they've done since. And, a great choice by Terry Small and company to, eject them out of there before, they did their damage. But then you invite in Frostburg and Salisbury and Wesley, so it doesn't get any easier. Right. Tell us about, you've been a great proponent in this interview already about the NJAC. And I know that Terry Small and company look to you for your experience. You've been a head coach at Rowan since 2002, I believe. What really do you see in this conference, looking back and now looking forward, that makes it the strong conference, and a conference that wants to have these overachieving teams when it comes down to it, because these are no slack teams at all when you look at it. I mean, Southern Virginia and CNU can bite any team, really, if it comes down to it, too. Give us your overall state of the NJAC speech here and where you see it going from here.
Well, I think when I first got here in the early 90s as an assistant, the reason we made so many runs in the playoffs was because we were playing really good competition just within our conference. And I think that hasn't changed. The conference has changed over the years in terms of the membership and who it is, but the members have always been very competitive. When we needed to expand, we took in the New York State school, Cortland and Brockport and Morrisville and Buff State, and those schools just made it really even very competitive. It wasn't our option to lose them. They kind of left to jump into the Empire 8. I had always thought it would be a perfect world if the New York State schools, the New Jersey State schools, and the ones south of us would all join and make a really strong state school type of conference. Unfortunately, we lost the New York team, so we had to be proactive and try to find teams to maintain the automatic bid, and we ended up getting the schools that we did. It's always been competitive. Again, all you need to do is look at what Frostburg did last year. They lose. They don't win the conference. Wesley wins the conference, and Frostburg makes the great run. I thought the Frostburg team 2 years ago that didn't get in the playoffs was just as good. So, unfortunately, I think when they went to the automatic bids, it changed the landscape. I don't think you're taking the best teams. I understand, there's more private schools than state schools, so they want to be included and they want to make sure they're included. But I think, unfortunately, sometimes with the automatic bids, you're not taking the best teams. You're just taking maybe the best team in a conference in an area, but certainly may not be the best team compared to other conferences. And you made that point. some of the teams in our conference that have 500 records or below probably could win a lot of those other conferences. It's just the nature of how it is and how it works out. You just have to understand that. I think we've just always embraced in our conference to play the best football we can play, and hopefully prepare whatever team goes into the playoffs will be successful, whether it's the ECACs or the NCAA playoffs. And I think that's just clearly an indication of the last couple of years, and especially last year with Frostburg making that run. It's always been great football in the conference. It's been some different teams, but again, I think it's one of the best in the country in Division III.
Just 5 at-large playoff slots this year for those that weren't aware of it, and that goes right to your point that I think in the old days we used to have around 7 or 8 at least, so at least you got a couple more teams, but because the conferences get the automatic bids, we're down to essentially 5 plus the Pool B bid, which is basically NJAC plus Thomas More. So it's an interesting landscape. JB, I know you got more questions.
Yeah, I got a couple, but one that I wanted to talk to Coach about was, with these seems like every couple of years you have teams kind of moving in and out of conferences. One of the things that's challenging for you as a head football coach is knowing who you might play after that happens. You get into certain rivalries. So, I mean, with some of this exodus now, and once again leaving the NJAC, have you guys had any success? I did place a phone call to a certain New York State coach to call you guys about a game. Hopefully he did that. But are you getting some phone calls? Are you making some phone calls trying to get some stuff on the schedule in the next couple of years as some of these teams depart?
Yeah, and we knew Southern Virginia was going to leave. The Frostburg situation was kind of a quick one when they've decided to jump Division II. So now we're looking for 2 games next year where we thought it was 1. It's always been hard to get games just because of our conference, the competitive level of our conference, and the reputation of the teams in our conference. When I first got here in the early 90s, we were playing 1AA and Division II teams. I really don't want to have to do that. But we may have to travel. I know, speaking to the athletic director, Dan Gilmore, we've talked about Linfield and some other games. It's just the nature of the sport, and unfortunately, the reputation of our conference is difficult. I don't see us adding any teams, even though I know we'd love to. What teams want to jump into a conference that has 3 nationally ranked teams and some other teams that are really good? So I don't think that's realistic. It's just a matter of us just trying to find other games. We'll find somebody. We'll play somebody. It's just a matter of where and who and how much money and what you need to do to make it happen. It reminds me when I first became head coach in the early 2000s, that was the situation before we added the New York schools. We were always scrambling to get a couple of games. The Widener games worked out really nice because it's close. I have a good relationship with the head coach. It makes for a great rival type game, but it's going to be very challenging to get 2 more games. I think it's just the nature of, teams want to not play really tough teams and dodge teams just to get wins, just to win their conference to get in the playoffs. We've never really had that. I learned when I got here that's not the way to do it. We're going to play whoever it is to be the best football team that we can be, because we know we're going to play some really good teams in conference automatically.
Very true. By the way, if you get a phone call from Hobart, the guy right down there is probably one of the causes of it. I will name names for him that he wouldn't name, as James is a graduate of Hobart and a big proponent, and also keeps him abreast of the landscape of what's going on. So that would be a great matchup, I think, Hobart Rowan matchup. Let's see what happens. So, Coach, we don't usually ask coaches that aren't in a game to make a prediction, but I'm going to ask for an exception to the rule here. Nichols, Western New England, who you got this weekend?
Well, obviously being a former Bison and following the program there, I'm always going to pick my alma mater, Nichols. I know they've turned it around a little bit and have started to do some really exciting things. I haven't had the chance to get up there, obviously, because I'm busy, but certainly I follow through fellow teammates of mine, former teammates of mine, and alums and things. And, I'm all, you cut me, I bleed green and brown and gold. So I'm picking the Bison all the way.
There you go. So I lead into. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You go for it.
Well, I would say, speaking of the brown and gold, which I think is probably one of the more iconic, football uniform colors out there. I mean, especially in the D3 landscape, you guys are very unique. That's been a constant at Rowan for a long time. But I've been looking at the schedule, and it seems like all these home games have certain themes to them. And this Saturday, when you guys host Salisbury, it says Profs Go Purple. So are you guys going to come out with purple uniforms for this game, or what's going on, Coach?
Well, our budget isn't that big, so I don't think you'll see us come out in purple or gray or anything like that. But, certainly I think the university and the athletic department have done a great job to have different themes. Obviously, a lot of our guys were in pink this past weekend, being October. We try to do whatever we can. I know the last game of the year is Military Appreciation Night, so we try to honor them. And obviously this weekend wearing the purple. So, again, it provides the players a little bit of ability to change the colors a little bit. I think they enjoy wearing the brown and gold. But certainly I think the school's done a great job in the athletic department of kind of having themes with the games too, which is, really important. Again, if you look at our schedule, 6 night games we're playing this year, which has never happened before. But I think, again, small college football's got to find a way to squeeze themselves in with the NFL and Division I and all the TV games. And we've had great atmospheres at our night games, both home and away. But again, I think we've done a great job of. And again, in Division III, you need to understand they're not paid; they're there to play. So you need to be aware of the other social aspects in life and what's going on, and that's why we'll be wearing a lot of the purple to go with our uniform this weekend.
Last question for you, Coach. We brought up over the last couple of weeks, Brockport has hit number 3, which matches the best D3Football.com top 25 ranking by an East Region team, which was your 2006 team in the preseason Week 1, Week 2, and Week 3 polls. Rarefied air, to say the least. And we all remember the Rowan teams of the 2000s. We're still talking about the Rowan teams of the 2010s because they may go down for a couple seasons and they pop right back up because of your tutelage on the sidelines, obviously. But Jason Mangoni, we had on the show last week, a younger head coach. It's new to a lot of people. What advice would you give Coach Mangoni or the Brockport team and any other team that's basically on the rise? I mean, Frostburg might have been eligible for this, but they're leaving us, obviously, after this season. But what advice would you give them about the attention that they get, the bullseye that they basically get on their back, how to handle it, and make sure that they're kind of securing a longevity to the popularity and strength that they are experiencing right now?
Well, first of all, I need to talk about East football too, and I think unfortunately there's a knock about football in the East that it's not as good as some of the areas of Division III and the other areas. It doesn't help that Mount Union is sitting really close to the East region. So again, I remember back in the day when there was a North, a South, an East, and a West, and it was geographically done. So you were able to put teams in certain regions, and then that would happen. When they decided to get the automatic bids and then do the seeding and then fly people and do all these different things, I think unfortunately the East took a unfair knock because they just always stuck Mount Union as the East team, and then whatever East team was there, they were thought of as a second-hand team. I don't think that's fair. I think Eastern Region football is tremendous. I think especially in Division III, there's more teams. There's more play. So I think unfortunately the East has taken a knock just because of the seeding and what they think and what they do. It's nice to see that we're getting the reputation that we should get. I've heard the Brockport team is a really good football team. But then again, I've seen some really good teams we've played from the East as well. I think unfortunately that has happened because of the seeding. and the illusion that Mount Union's an East team and they should just always be the number 1 seed. I don't think that's fair. But again, to your question, I think you just got to treat each week as best you can and understand that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're ranked, no matter what's going on, you need to play the game, and you need to play at a really high level. We've played Brockport in the past when they were in the conference, and they had some really tremendous teams. I go back to the Buffalo State teams we played in the early 90s when I first got here. If they had kind of won some games over us, they would have gotten the reputation that we did. But I think it's just you got to be really careful when you get to that level, that you really need to understand you got to just stay true to who you are and what you do. And does it surprise me about Brockport? No. They're one of the teams we're looking at playing with our open dates in the future. It's a great school, has a rich tradition and history. We had some great battles with them. I know Jason from when he was an assistant there. And again, I'm sure he understands what it takes to stay where you need to be and not get caught up in all the other things that happen. And again, unfortunately, I think the East gets a knock that's not fair. But I would stack up any East team that's playing really well, like Brockport, against any other team in the country. Same with Frostburg and Wesley and Salisbury and all the others, and even Rowan. But again, when you get to that point, you have to really cherish and understand what got you to that point. And I think when teams do that, you can stay at a really high level over an extended period of time.
Well, coming up next is Salsbury, and a tough team to say the least, undefeated. Coach, good luck. We could talk to you all day long about the past, present, and future of Division III football for sure. Hope to run across you again, and some of your players as well, to talk to them about the successes that your team experiences. So thank you for this interview, to say the least. We appreciate having you and your time right now.
Thank you very much for having me. And again, anytime you can recognize our players, especially, at the Division III level, I think it's really important because there's really, really good football at our level.
Thank you, Coach.